Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion topic video. This one we're going to be talking about immortality and longevity in the Avatar universe. So pretty interesting topic. You probably already have a sense just from those two words, the type of things that we're going to be talking about. How certain characters live to be so long, what does immortality mean? Is there a way to accomplish it in the Avatar world? That sort of thing. Before we get into that though, just a few things to cover first of all. First of course is that I do have YouTube channel membership active on my channel at this point. You can become a member to the channel and to help support it if you wish. Just click the join button anywhere on the channel. There's also a link in the description to it, and you can join at either the Light Spirit or Avatar tier, and either way you will have access to the loyalty badges and exclusive emojis that I made that you can use in the comment section and in live chat, which is important because I am now doing live streams on the channel. So on last Saturday, you saw that I did my first live stream covering my top 10 airbender and top 10 waterbender lists, and it went pretty well. And this Saturday at the exact same time, so that's at 7 p.m. Ireland time, which is 2 p.m. Eastern time in America, and obviously time convert to your correct region. I will be doing my second live stream this Saturday. So it's going to be my top 10 Earthbender list, and then instead of trying to cram in all the lists together, we're just doing the Earthbender list, and then we'll also have a quick discussion on me talking more about my episode ranking lists that I've done over the last couple of weeks as sort of a secondary topic. So check that out. But yeah, we're here today to talk about immortality and longevity in the Avatar world. So let's just get some things out of the way. There's not going to be a lot of visuals to this, just because a lot of it comes from the novels and so on, and you guys know, I suppose, most of the characters I'm going to be talking about. So first thing to note is that all spirits are immortal, and even when they're killed, they will just be reborn in a new form. So that's a very important thing to note, is just that immortality isn't just sort of like a magical ability type thing in the Avatar world. It's already there through all spirits. And it's notable because, of course, another name for the physical world is the mortal world or mortal realm, and that is the key difference. The beings on the spiritual side of the world are immortal, the physical beings, of course, aren't. Humans are mortal in the physical sense, in that their body dies over time and ages, but human spirits do reincarnate. A human who leaves their physical body behind can become a spirit, and we have multiple examples of this. Iroh, of course, is probably the most obvious one, but a character, say, like the Painted Lady, is another example of this. And then we do also know that it can work in reverse. Certain spirits are able to basically make themselves mortal again, but that doesn't seem to be just a default thing any spirit can do. So Lady Tianhai from the Rift comics is an example of sort of the reverse. A spirit can leave their, immortality behind to become mortal, but as you would expect, of course, they still fundamentally have a spirit, even if they have become mortal. So even when they die, they'll just be reborn once again, which is what happens with Lady Tianhai. The line turtles are interesting because they're implied to be extremely long-lived and potentially immortal as physical beings, as shown by the fact that even Rava calls a line turtle Ancient One. So that speaks to, I suppose, them as physical beings, the ones that live the longest. The other thing would be that Ran and Shaw are also said to be ancient dragons, implying that dragons also have very long lives. So they're the sort of, I suppose, most extreme examples of all of this stuff, that immortality as a concept shouldn't be something that's too wild and crazy, and the idea of things living long, it's not completely out of the blue, but humans, of course, are always going to be the focus in Avatar. So in this next one, let's cover humans that have long lifespans in Avatar. So we have a bunch of characters who are like very active still, benders, combatants in their like 60s, 70s, 80s. But we do have a surprising amount of characters who are over 100 years old. So you can see here, Sozin died when he was 102 years old. Bumi, of course, depending on what timeline you're looking at here. Right now in the Avatar comics, there's been no mention of him dying, so Bumi is still alive right now in the comics. So he's 112 plus years old, so he's probably at least 115 right now in the comics where we are. That's pretty interesting. Guru Patik is 150 plus years old, because again, we haven't had confirmation that he's died in the comics or anything like that. So realistically, this guy is 154 now or something like that. That is really notable. Like 112 is sort of that like interesting age range where like it's kind of like, okay, it's an extreme number, but it's not like so far over the top that it's like just it makes no sense. Guru Patik being 150 is getting into like, okay, that's kind of crazy. Kyoshi lived to be 230 years old, which is sort of in a way what prompted like this this video. It prompted the explanation from the novels about her age. So a lot of this information is kind of because Kyoshi had to be 230 the way they described the timeline and so on. And then we have Lao Ge from the Kyoshi novels, who is, they don't specify an exact age for him, but the legends the characters talk about within the Kyoshi novels state that he's at least over 200 years old, and then he himself implies to Kyoshi, with some of what they're talking about, that he could potentially be over 4,000 years old, because he basically says in a line of dialogue that he had direct contact with Guru Shoken, who was around at the same time as Guru Lahima, as sort of like philosophers with competing ideals. And we know from Korra, Zahir says that Guru Lahima lived, 4,000 years ago. So obviously we're more talking like 3,000 something years, but because, he's a certain age, it's in around 4,000. Either way, the idea is that this guy does actually have the secret to immortality to a degree. So an extreme age applies to him, even if we don't know exactly what it is. So then we have just some facts here, of course. Guru Patik is the lone non-bender on this list, and of the rest, only Sozin is not an earthbender. So this is going to get into this idea of like, does being an earthbender or being from the Earth Kingdom have anything to do with this? It's a little bit up in the air. So let's just quickly go over this. So Sozin, I think you just have to put that down to, that's a relatively normal age. There's always examples of that even in real life, of people living to over 100. It happens. It's just kind of a rarity. And him living to 102 is actually, it's not like that notable, but because he's one of the few characters we know to be over 100, it's worth noting. Kyoshi and Lao Ge's long lives are explained in the Kyoshi novels, and I'll cover this shortly. Guru Patik's long life is explained, it was mentioned on the old Nickelodeon website that it was because of like yoga and meditation and just, how well he knows the body and, chakras, chi paths. Because he is a guru and is aware of the sort of spirituality and the way energy works in the body, combined with his use of yoga, meditation, and healthy lifestyle, that allowed him to live to 150 years old. Now, because of the explanation we're going to get into with Kyoshi and Lao Ge, likely Patik has used the exact same method, it's just from a slightly different mindset, more or less. Bumi could just be old and in good shape, a sort of more extreme Sozin example, but there probably is some element of the Lao Ge technique involved here. This probably depends how long Bumi actually lives. Like, if Bumi does, die within the next few years in the timeline in the comics, at, 117 or something like that, then it's kind of like, okay, he probably just was this extreme character who lived, a really long life, but it wasn't, insane. That would tell us maybe, yeah, it probably just is a case of, he kept himself in good shape. if he does actually go on to live until he's like 130, 40, 50, it probably has to lean more into the technique we're going to go into just now. And that is Lao Ge's secret to immortality. It does get explained. Obviously, how in-depth you think this is completely up to you and how you interpret it. But they give the explanation, the concept behind how this works. So this is in the Rise of Kyoshi, so the first Kyoshi novel. It's not really touched on in the second book all that much, at all really. Nor is it really explained by the end of the Kyoshi novels that, like, you know, I suppose Kyoshi's decision making surrounding when she decides to properly like activate and commit to this technique. But the idea is that she does use it. This is the explanation for Kyoshi living to be 230. So, you know, there's a scene in the book when he basically asks Kyoshi to ask him about his age. Everyone else asks me about my age. You ask me too. And she jokingly is just like, okay, Sifu, teach me how to like live forever, basically. And he's like, anything for my dear student. You see, it all comes down to maintaining order, keeping things neat, clean, and tidy. Aging is really just your body falling apart on the smallest, most invisible levels, and neglecting to put itself back together. With the right mental focus, you could take an inventory of your own body and place each little piece that's not where it should be back into the correct order. Kyoshi says, and he says that this is actually correct, the way you describe it, you'd have to decide what version of yourself you'd be stuck as forever. Exactly. And he gives this his own kind of advice, words of wisdom, basically. Those who grow live and die. The stagnant pool is immortal, while the clear flowing river dies an uncountable number of deaths. So that's the idea behind the technique. As you can see there, it's just about maintaining order in the body. There's a scientific explanation here. It's like, you know, aging is the body slowly beginning to fall apart. You know, it's this idea of, you know, kind of entropy. Everything that's sort of ordered eventually goes to being disordered. But if you try to counteract that growing disorder and constantly sort of, you know, remake yourself, then you can prevent this aging process by constantly remaking yourself. You allow yourself to just be the same over and over again. And he goes into depth on sort of, I wouldn't say depth, but he explains a few times about the mind is important in this. As we'll get into it, the next sort of section here, it's a bit longer. It's nearly a full page. Later on in the book, like he just says that to her, and then she's just, it's not implied that they really do anything. But then, here we get the explanation. Lao Ge had insisted, despite her protest that she didn't need to unlock the secrets of immortality, he'd made her join him in his daily longevity exercises. She told him flat out that she considered the concept bunk. This isn't spiritualism, he said. You don't have to believe, you simply have to practice. He'd taken her to the same spots that a guru would meditate in. The curves of flowing rivers, the stumps of once massive trees, caves bored into the cliffside. But he'd also filled her ear with counterintuitive nonsense. Instead of blocking everything out like how you would normally meditate, take it all in. Notice each blade of grass in the same moment you would notice a single one. And then he goes on to say, divide your body in two, then divide it again, and again, and again. Put the pieces back, and put them back again, and one more time, and you're whole once more. And Kyoshi says to this, a human being isn't a block of stone. And he says, that's where you're wrong. The illusion that the self is separate from the rest of the world is the driving factor that limits our potential. Once you realize that there's nothing special about the self, it becomes easier to manipulate. So he's just basically presenting the idea here that, you know, he sees, you know, yourself as an individual, your person, as being something you can manipulate like a block of stone. And that trying to view it as like, oh, humans are like the super special, like the structure and stuff like that, it's like sacred or spiritual in some way and there's nothing you can do to affect it, is kind of wrong. No, like, be mindful of yourself, think about yourself in a way, and, take it apart, take inventory of it, and, lock in that version of yourself the way you want yourself to be. Take it apart and be like, okay, does what you have, all those parts, does it match up to that inventory you took? If not, put them back together in the right way. Fix that sort of like damage or whatever, that aging process that begins to happen. That's the way it's described. Obviously not in super specific detail, but the way he describes it, of course, here is that literally the technique is just meditation. Bending does not come into it at all, because if we assume that Guru Patik is using the same technique, just meditation, which would make sense, given that the whole idea of like yoga and meditation as well is a key to how Guru Patik lived so long. This is basically the same thing. It's just you would probably say Guru Patik is much more about spiritualism than the more practical approach here that Lao Ge has. Again, Lao Ge, otherwise known as Tiegwai the Immortal, that's the legendary name he's known by. He has a different approach to things. In the same way that we have in the Kyoshi novels a fire sage called Nyata, who tends to approach spiritual matters in the more technical side of things. He tends to take away all of the sort of spiritual reverence away from it and just really get down to, this is the effect it's going to have on you. So it's just that different approach in all of this, and again, it's up to you to interpret this exactly. Instead of blocking everything out like normal meditation, take everything in. Notice everything at the same time as you notice an individual thing, as like, this is the sort of different approach that you truly need to have. Be able to view every aspect of your body, not just focusing on one specific bit. And again, he really highlights the idea of your mind being this thing that people don't think about enough, they don't train enough, and that you can train your mind to sort of be aware of every single individual aspect of your body, even on the most minuscule scale. So that's basically this technique. It's like, is it the best answer? Is it the most satisfying answer? It's really up to you. But it's an explanation that Kyoshi does go on to use. She continues to do this over the years, and this is how she manages to live as long as she does. Now, of course, can you actually achieve immortality with this technique or not? That's what's not clear. Does it just allow you to live a few hundred years longer than you usually would? Or can you actually live forever if you commit to this and are disciplined with it? It really depends on what age they'd probably confirm Lao Ge as. If he is only like just over 200 years, then it probably suggests that it's like, you can probably double your lifespan, or maybe like times 3 your lifespan. If he manages to live to over 4,000 or whatever, then it probably is the case where it's up to you to choose. That there comes a certain point where, I suppose mentally, can you take living that long, watching generations upon generations of people go by, and you are the only like eternal thing, that's going to take it out of you. And Lao Ge has such an interesting approach that it makes sense why he could do that. But for everyone else, you got the impression that like, okay, protect the world for like 200 years to stabilize it, that's your time. And I think that's probably the big thing with Kyoshi that I want to know at this point is, why 230 specifically? Why only that long? Was it just the way things go? Her as the avatar having to like fight a lot or whatever? Did that play a role? Or did she just choose eventually to be like, okay, I'm going to stop doing these longevity exercises, stop, dividing my body down, putting it back together to, go against the aging process? Is it as simple as that, or is there more of a reason behind it? That's the big question. But that's really all there is there. Next, let's get into Hundun and Immortality. Hundun is obviously the villain of the Legend of Korra video game. Now, like it says here, the core video game story is pretty vague. There's not a lot of depth to it if you've ever gone through the story. The motives of Hundun as a character come down to pretty much one line of dialogue where basically everything of note is said. And because it's only one line of dialogue, it's like open to interpretation, nothing's really explained, but this is what he says. When you injured me in a fight thousands of years ago, I was forced to meditate into the spirit world seeking immortality, and after countless ages of searching, I discovered a technique that will make me whole again, a way to extract chi from what the mystics call your Dan Tian. The pronunciation on this in the video game is more like Pan Qian or something like that, but the text is Dan Tian, which if you look up is it's a part of like obviously Eastern philosophy when it comes to like energy pathways in the body, and is basically translates to sort of, you know, sea of chi. So it's sort of the main storage area of the body when it comes to chi. So that makes sense, extracting chi from the place in the body that it is stored. So what's my interpretation of this? My interpretation is that in the spirit world, he is immortal because he is badly injured by an avatar and chooses to meditate into the spirit world, which means his spirit is separate from his body. So he lets his body die. So he becomes basically like Iroh as a human spirit living in the spirit world. And he lives there for at least 1,000 years, though it's sort of said thousands of years. So it's, again, a little bit vague. But still, he spends hundreds of years in the spirit world, searching for a way, like he says here, to make him whole again. In that his goal, his motivation, is making himself whole again, not immortality. That he went to the spirit world seeking immortality, which he achieved because he was a spirit. I'm guessing it's just a case where he was spiritual enough to know he could meditate into the spirit world, but never knew for sure if he left his body behind if he would be technically immortal. So it's hard to fully know whether or not, like, okay, is immortality actually his main goal in all of this, or is it just achieving a physical form once again? I take it that his goal is actually to restore himself as a physical being, because he does talk about how, you know, he used to be a king. He has this like great treasure in the physical world that he feels he can only sort of use once he is physical again, and so he discovers this technique where he can make himself whole again, restore himself back to being physical by extracting the chi from someone, and I guess it has to be someone powerful who has a lot of chi, like the Avatar. So he targets Korra, of course, because it was a past Avatar that, you know, basically forced him into this situation. He wants revenge, and this process, extracting all of her chi, will basically kill her. Because again, chi is obviously the energy source for the body, both in terms of like movement, but it's also the source of bending. So if you take all of someone's chi out, you basically, it means they have no energy, so they basically have no sort of life force, if you view it in that way. And so you go on from there of like in Avatar, chi is physical energy as opposed to spirit energy and cosmic energy, the other forms of energy in Avatar. So it makes sense that to restore himself as a physical being, he needs to have chi of his own again, and I'm guessing once he has chi, he can then easily form just like a physical body, because there's the chi to sort of support it. Now, the question here, obviously, is that, is his goal to make himself physical again and thus make himself mortal when he was already immortal as a spirit? Or does this technique allow him to sort of be immortal as a physical being? Now, we don't actually know, I suppose, particularly how that works, in that if, say, he did restore himself physically by killing Korra and taking her chi, he'd have a physical body again, but it would surely die eventually over time. So if he does it again, can he effectively use the chi to sort of create a new body? Sort of do, just on a different type of scale, what the Lao Ge technique does, except like by literally energy means. Stealing chi, making a new body, when this one runs out, get more chi, like make a new body. Obviously, the make a new body part is the complicated part that is not explained in any way, because obviously chi is energy. How does that result in like a physical body? But we know spirits can make themselves physical, so they can have physical contact with people. I'm guessing they just can't hold that form unless they have chi. So I'm guessing it's something along those lines. And just that he will constantly need more chi to make this happen, and can probably keep himself alive and immortal as a physical being by extracting chi from other people. Now, again, the exact details behind that is kind of like, so wait, does that mean he won't be able to ever generate his own chi? Or is it just a case where, like, because he is old, he'll die after a certain point, but he can constantly keep doing that? Again, the game is vague. There's not a lot of detail there, but that's my interpretation of it. That I focus more on the make me whole again part than the immortality part, because as a spirit, he is immortal. He's already achieved that. And he spent the countless ages not searching for immortality, but the technique to make him whole again. So that's my interpretation. So that's pretty much it when we break it down. Obviously, there's going to be questions, there's going to be speculation about, like, okay, Patik and Bumi, did they both use this technique, the Lao Ge technique, to achieve their advanced age? It's not entirely clear. Now, why is it that so many of these characters are like earthbenders? Because Hundun, obviously as a physical being, was an earthbender as well. I think it just comes down to, if you look again at the philosophy of Lao Ge's technique, it talks about being stagnant, being the same, being stable, sticking yourself forever as one version of yourself. That's what you want to achieve. That seems to somewhat align with the general philosophy of earthbending, which is to be sort of rooted, to be stable, to, survive, persist through anything. And that's why, in general, it's a style where you form a hard stance and don't move from your spot and work from there. I think that's just the general idea, that earthbenders typically will tend to be able to adapt to this version of a philosophy more so than people of other nations. But it doesn't mean that the people can't do it, because obviously Guru Patik, we assume, through the whole his meditation and yoga, that he's also doing roughly the same thing. But he has more of a connection with the air nomads. He's a spiritual, friend of the air nomads. So you'd align him with a nation probably more with the air nomads than anything else. Yet air is the opposite of earth. So it just highlights that it's not that the philosophy is completely set in stone. It's just easier for people to understand that, which I think probably helps to explain why Bumi probably just naturally, if he does meditation to keep himself fit at such a advanced age, he probably benefits from at least partially what the Lao Ge technique is. Even if he's not doing it completely, this is what's helping him live longer. And I think you can probably, on a more general scale, apply this to a lot of the older characters who are still very powerful benders that we see. The likes of Paku being as skilled and agile as he is, like in his 80s, and the like. That they're part of the Order of the White Lotus, so they're aware of a lot of spiritual techniques, the philosophies of other nations, that even if they're not going quite to the extremes of this, of like Kyoshi says, choosing a version of yourself to stay like that forever, but, meditating, focusing on themselves, and keeping at least parts of their body going and adverse to the effects of aging. You can sort of see what we're talking about here. But I think that is the discussion that we can have on this for now. It's not really something I think we're going to see tons of going forward. Any more Kyoshi content, I assume it will come up. in that I assume there's a little bit more to tell with Lao Ge. In terms of like, is this character actually still alive? Or when did he die? Kyoshi, when did she make her decision to only live to 230? Or was it a decision? When does Boomy die? When does Batik die? Like, there is a question surrounding these longer lived characters of like that we don't actually know when some of them died and so on. So that's all pretty interesting. But there's my thoughts, my initial presentation of this idea of immortality and longevity in the Avatar world. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this whole technique. Lao Ge and his approach, the Hundun version of things, and just how it all fits into everything that we know. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, final thing is just a thank you to my Avatar tier channel members, Cash D's, Martin Monterosa, and Caitlin Thurston for supporting the channel. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.